Linda, I need those handoff decks by COB. Actually, no, I need him before lunch. We're doing agile now. Speed is everything. That was the first sentence Callie ever said to me. Not hi, not nice to meet you, not even a fake corporate compliment like love your ops flowcharts. Nope, just a barked command and a buzzword sandwich. I looked up from my screen calmly, like I'd done for 7 years while fixing other people's messes. My coffee was still too hot to drink, and the new VP was already lighting fires like she was auditioning for a reality show called Survivor, Spreadsheet Island. I gave her the nod, the one that says sure you'll learn. For 7 years, I ran the invisible machine behind every quarterly win our execs crowed about on LinkedIn. Vendor integrations, me. Licensing agreements, me. Employee onboarding, me again. If it involved logistics, timing, or anything requiring a brain not drunk on jargon, it had my name on it. I wasn't flashy. I didn't have a ring light in my office or a collection of inspirational coffee mugs. But when a system broke, they called me. Then HQ dropped Callie into our org like a glitter bomb filled with MBA confidence and a grudge against nuance. She had a spreadsheet for her motivational quotes. Let's disrupt stagnation, she said on day 2. We're going to energize the org structure, she said on day 3. On day 4, she tried to change how we log software licenses and nearly wiped out 3 departments' access to Jira. I don't say this lightly. Watching her reorganize our workflows was like watching someone do surgery with a selfie stick. Loud, chaotic, and somehow still proud of the damage. Oh, and if you've made it this far into my little therapy session disguised as a story, go ahead and tap that subscribe button or like this. I mean, 90% of you lurk in the shadows like Linda during Callie's icebreaker meetings. Don't be Callie, be helpful. Hit the buttons. It keeps the stories coming and the team caffeinated. Anyway, Callie was shiny. She wore blazers like armor and dropped buzzwords like breadcrumbs. Fresh energy, she'd repeat like a spell every time someone looked confused. She liked talking about new paradigms and unblocking value streams, even though half the time she was the actual block. My peers, they smiled tight smiles, nodded politely, and waited for the dust to settle. But I wasn't just another brick in her buzzword wall. I started noticing the little things first. My calendar began filling up with status updates instead of strategy calls. My standing invite to the ops review meetings, gone. Client escalation routes I'd built over 5 fiscal years were rerouted to Jordan, her new golden retriever of an assistant, who once misspelled workflow in a slide deck and somehow still got applause. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe she just needed time. But then she told HR I had low team adaptability because I didn't clap during her vision deck reveal. Real quote, we need believers, not maintainers. I wasn't maintaining. It was preventing collapse. One Monday, I opened my laptop to find I'd been removed from 3 shared drives. The ones I created, no warning, no explanation, just poof like I'd never existed. She'd replaced my SOP folder with something called Go Mode Toolkit. It had a Canva design checklist and a looping video of Callie explaining Scrum philosophy while a ukulele played in the background. That's when I knew I wasn't being transitioned. I was being erased. But here's the thing about quiet people who build things. We know where every wire is buried. Every license ID, every vendor contact, every backdoor we installed when systems failed during a holiday surge, logged, timestamped, and sitting in my own drive. And when someone starts pulling your name off things without understanding how deeply you're embedded, that's not a transfer. That's sabotage. She called me impossible to manage during our first one-on-one. I smiled, because what she didn't know yet, what she couldn't know, is that I had already begun drawing the blueprint. Not for revenge, for survival. I wasn't going to burn the building down. I was just going to walk out and take the keys with me. The first time she excluded me from a client call, she blamed the calendar. Oh, weird, I thought I'd added you. Her voice had that sing-song guilt-pretend tone, like a barista pretending they just ran out of oat milk. Never mind that it was a multi-year partner I'd onboarded personally, one who still emailed me directly every time their procurement system hiccuped. The second time, she didn't bother with a lie. Just forwarded the meeting recap and wrote, FYI. By the third time, I'd already stopped waiting for explanations. She was drawing lines, redrawing org charts, and trying to turn a veteran team into a jazz hands startup showcase. I got reassigned to process auditing, which sounded fancy until I realized it meant rewriting workflows I'd built from scratch, using templates she downloaded off a project management blog with a neon color palette. Linda, can you start logging your daily hours by category? I just want visibility, she said in a meeting she held with just the two of us, in a room the size of a walk-in closet. I blinked. We already tracked tickets in Jira and Asana. She smiled like I'd handed her a compliment. Exactly, but that's more team-based. I need individual accountability. It's a growth initiative. That's when I started a folder on my desktop, named it Growth Initiative out of spite. Inside it, I dropped screenshots, calendar deletions, Slack messages where I was at mention for cleanup but never for planning. I copied email chains where I was removed from decision threads I'd started. I made it pretty. Timestamps, links, notations. Not because I was scared, because I was thorough. When the weekly leadership briefing disappeared from my calendar, I checked the invite list. My name had been replaced with Jordan's. Jordan, who once asked if vendor onboarding needed contracts or if we could just handshake it for now. I messaged him. Didn't realize you were leading Monday's sync. He replied with a gif of a dog in sunglasses and the word vibes. I closed Slack. Opened Notion. Logged the change. It wasn't just exclusion. It was erosion, and it was quiet. That's how it always starts. Not with slamming doors or angry tirades. With oops with visibility with compliments that feel like poison pills wrapped in ribbon. Technically strong, but you're impossible to manage. That's what she said in my quarterly review, smiling like she was reading an inspirational quote off a bathroom mirror. I just think, you have such a strong mind, she added, but maybe too many convictions, it's like. You're always anticipating what's needed, which can come off as uncollaborative. Isn't anticipating what's needed the job? I asked, even though I knew the answer didn't matter. She leaned back in her chair, tilted her head, and did that performative sigh people do when they think they're teaching you something. There's doing the work and then there's aligning. What she meant was, I made her look like she didn't know what she was doing. Which, to be fair, she didn't. But in corporate, perception trumps performance. Always, she assigned me to assist Jordan with license tracking. The same licenses I negotiated, secured, and managed for 6 years without a single vendor complaint. Now I was supposed to sit back and watch him fumble through renewals like a raccoon poking at a vending machine. I let him, and I documented every mistake. I documented the missed renewal with the CRM tool that caused 2 days of sales blackout. I documented the new structure file she rolled out without QA, where 3 departments accidentally got admin access to HR folders. And when she told the team we were remapping responsibilities for flexibility, I quietly reassigned all my escalation contacts to trusted peers I'd trained for years. Gave them passwords. Gave them logs. Gave them my trust. What I didn't give Callie was access. She didn't know it. She was standing on scaffolding I'd built with blood and deadlines. And every time she tried to chip away at my place in the system, she made the whole thing creak a little louder. Eventually, she'd notice. But by then, I'd already be out of sight with the blueprints. The project was called Lighthouse. Not a sexy name, but it was mine. I'd pitched it back when we were drowning in disjointed vendor systems, cobbled together workflows, and enough shadow IT to qualify as a tech horror show. Lighthouse was supposed to bring clarity, merge finance ops, legal hold triggers, and customer service flows into one clean, trackable process map. It had been 2 years in the making. A slow grind of approvals, iterations, and pilot rollouts that somehow survived 3 budget freezes, an acquisition scare, and a pandemic. And then Callie handed it to Jordan. Not because he understood it, not because he contributed a single line to its scoping or design, but because he had enthusiasm, and she said the team needed a more visible face for the initiative. I was pulled from my own damn project with a calendar invite titled Leadership Realignment Touchpoint. She didn't even tell me face to face. Just popped into my office with a toot-cheery quick heads up and a 5-minute monologue about bandwidth optimization, alignment metrics, and other polished nonsense. When she finally paused, I asked, who's taking Lighthouse? Oh, she beamed like I'd asked her about a surprise party. Jordan, he's so passionate, and I think he'll really elevate the message. Elevate the message. The message, by the way, was, stop breaking the damn process or we'll be fined again. But sure, let's give it a spin and a mascot. The next day, I checked the shared drive. My name had been removed from all Lighthouse documentation. The folders still existed, the files still functioned, but the metadata, the little author stamps, the track changes, the Git history logs gone. Replaced with team project lead, Jordan T, like it had always been his. That's when the quiet fury set in. Not the kind you scream about, the kind you sharpen. I opened my terminal window, ran a few queries, downloaded the access history on the folders, saved the change logs, took screenshots of every commit I'd made, every proposal version, every client comment tag to my name. I cross-referenced email threads where Jordan wasn't even CC'd, proof he wasn't just late to the party. He hadn't even known it existed. I didn't send a single angry message. I just opened my private vault on Notion and dropped everything into a folder labeled Jordan's Miracle. I backed up all the procedural knowledge, every onboarding doc, every client-specific clause, every workaround we'd used during the early Lighthouse rollouts. I removed my name from the active permissions and left placeholder notes pointing to a shared dummy account I'd created 3 years ago in case of emergencies. Then I started poking around Jordan's update logs. He hadn't updated the license mapping spreadsheet in 2 weeks. He'd marked status green on a deliverable that hadn't even been approved by compliance. Posted a Slack update saying, we're live in 3 markets, when we were still in sandbox testing for 2 of them. And Callie, she clapped in the channel, yes, this is the energy I want to see. Of course it was. She wasn't looking for competence. She was building a stage. And Jordan, with his startup hoodie and meme-filled slide decks, was her opening act. I could have screamed. I could have rattled the team, gone to HR, written a manifesto about the death of merit in modern orgs. But I didn't because I wasn't done building. I took a deep breath, copied over the audit protocols to a private archive, and initiated what I now refer to as the Great Decoupling. One by one, I began shifting system ownership to the people I trusted, not as a rebellion, as preservation. These weren't just coworkers, they were the ones who stayed late with me during the security breach last March, who brought coffee during rollout weekends, who quietly covered when leadership flaked and then thanked each other in the postmortem. If Callie wanted a puppet show, fine, but she wasn't going to gut the system to make room for her cardboard throne. And Jordan, I didn't need to sabotage him. He was doing a fine job unraveling himself. All I had to do was keep the receipts. There's a particular kind of silence in an office when a system stops working. Not the dramatic, alarms blaring kind, no. It's the quiet chaos. People refreshing tabs, Slack messages trickling in, anyone else not seeing the dashboard, followed by a half-joking "is it just me?" And then like clockwork, the panic emojis. That silence happened 3 times in the first week after I started rewiring. Not because I broke anything, but because I moved the bones. It started small. I rerouted the API keys for 2 of our customer feedback tools. Originally, they were assigned to a generic admin account, something Jordan was supposed to own, though he couldn't tell you the difference between an API token and a QR code. I switched the dependency to a legacy credential set I created years ago, tied to an account with multi-factor auth, complete audit logs, and most importantly, me as the point of contact. Then I rewrote the SOP, not drastically, just enough to reflect current process standards, which now required credentials that lived in vaults only 3 of us had access to, and all 3 of us trusted peers. People I'd coached, promoted, defended during layoffs. People who still whispered this place is held together by duct tape and you when we passed in the hallway. Each doc I revised, workflow charts, client onboarding guides, procurement flows, I signed with my initials in the metadata. Not in bold, not loudly, but undeniably mine, tucked into version histories, embedded in file paths, noted in footnotes like breadcrumbs. Jordan didn't notice. Callie didn't care, which worked beautifully. Because if you want someone to step into a trap, you don't hide it, you just make it look like a shortcut. Around this time, I found it, buried in my original offer letter, sandwiched between PTO clauses and IP language, lines so dry you could miss it entirely. In cases of critical system development or designated operational foundations, the company recognizes foundational asset status, as outlined in Clause 8.2.1b. I blinked at the words for a full minute, foundational asset. I dug deeper. Found the attached clause in the employee handbook, one Callie had definitely never read, judging by her reaction to basic compliance language. Detailed rights for employees who built non-replaceable frameworks. Required board review before structural reallocation of such assets. More importantly, it required documentation of reallocation ownership, and failure to document triggered an audit. I nearly laughed, because they hadn't documented anything. Callie had been so obsessed with airbrushing my name out of visibility that she skipped the part where you actually, legally, move ownership of foundational systems. All those fresh starts? They weren't reassignments, they were voids. Voids filled by duct-taped dashboards and vibes. I printed the clause, highlighted it, slid it into a file folder labeled Endgame. Then I got back to work. The rewiring went faster after that. I started mapping all critical dependencies to the license tree I built years ago: software, vendor contracts, internal tools. All paths led through accounts I still had administrative access to. And instead of centralizing ownership under departments, I shifted them to individual contributors. The ones who understood the difference between process and presentation. The ones Callie had already ignored. I left comments in the handoff guides. Original created by Linda, updated per legacy config, ownership TBD pending review. I built redundancy, cross-trained backups, and turned the team into a distributed knowledge network she couldn't trace on a whiteboard, and I never said a word. I didn't need to. Callie thought she was erasing me, but I was making myself structural. I was the steel beam in the drywall she kept trying to knock down, and every time she painted over my name, she left the wiring intact. And it all led back to me. The first missed deadline was brushed off with a meme. Jordan dropped a Slack message in the team channel. A picture of a flaming dumpster floating down a flooded street with the caption, "We're pivoting." He added a laughing emoji and said, "Small hiccup with the lighthouse onboarding. Should be good by Friday." Startup vibes, only it wasn't a small hiccup. It was a missed compliance checkpoint for one of our oldest enterprise clients, meaning the integration window closed. The legal team had to file an extension. We were now technically out of SLA. I knew because the client forwarded the whole chain to me with a single line. "Not sure who's in charge anymore, but this isn't working." I didn't reply, I filed it. The second red flag came via finance. A vendor called looking for a renewed services agreement tied to our billing API. The original had expired 2 weeks prior, and their auto-suspension policy kicked in without so much as a courtesy ping, meaning our internal invoicing flow, the one Jordan proudly demoed in the all-hands, was dead in the water. I got the "Hey, do you still handle this?" call at 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. I didn't answer. I sent them Callie's email instead. The third blow was the kicker. Legal pulled Jordan into a compliance sync to ask why two required escalation paths were missing from the lighthouse deployment. He claimed the documentation had been overwritten during a versioning cleanup. They asked for backup. He didn't have one. They asked who did. He said, probably Linda. She ran this stuff before we revamped it. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Let it go to voicemail. That afternoon, Callie called an emergency retrospective, the kind where she paces in front of a monitor showing bullet points she clearly wrote 10 minutes prior. Half the team was silent. The other half was trying not to make eye contact. She clicked to a slide labeled System Fragility, Root Causes, and then, with that polished fake sweet tone she used when trying to sound above the fray, said, Look, I inherited broken systems. We're doing our best, but clearly some of these issues are legacy. Rigid workflows, centralized permissions, tribal knowledge, it's a lot. I tilted my head. Legacy, that was cute. I waited, didn't say a word. Let the silence eat her alive. Then came the back-end audit. It was supposed to be a routine compliance refresh, just vendor check-ins, license confirmations, data integrity spot checks. But on the second day, one of our long-term partners flagged an access discrepancy. Their system logs showed 3 failed API handshake attempts from our end. Their rep, a man named Ray I'd worked with since 2018, called Jordan, then emailed Jordan, and finally looped in Callie. And when neither could explain who currently held administrative permission tokens for the legacy onboarding suite, he asked a simple question. Who has Linda's permissions now? No one replied, because the answer was no one. Those tokens were tied to my admin vault, locked behind two-factor, encrypted, and scrubbed from general access once Callie transitioned the system to Jordan. Except Jordan never updated the credentials, never reassigned the ownership, never completed the vendor compliance rekeying because he didn't know what it was. I did, and I had the audit trail. So when the vendor's inquiry made it to legal and legal escalated to the board liaison, and the board liaison asked in writing, who is the current owner of this system dependency, Callie finally pinged me directly. Her message was 6 words, do you still have access? I stared at it. Then opened my Endgame folder. Opened the clause, opened the backup logs. Opened the screenshots, the signature chains, the Slack export with Jordan she ran this stuff comment. Then I closed the laptop. I knew what was coming, and it was going to be quiet, surgical, and very, very satisfying. The invite hit my inbox at 9:17 a.m. Subject line, cross-functional ops sync lighthouse plus systems review. I almost laughed. The guest list wasn't the usual suspects. This wasn't a team huddle or a Jordan-led bragfest. No, this was executive oxygen, names I hadn't seen looped in since the acquisition year. Board liaison, present. Legal counsel, present. An external partner from our infrastructure vendor, someone with an email address ending in. Solutions, which always means expensive and important, also present. And then there was me, listed at the very bottom under optional attendees. I clicked accept, sat back, sipped my coffee. I already knew what Callie was planning. She was going to turn the meeting into a pageant. Paint over the mess with a deck full of gradients and acronyms. Talk about process modernization, toss in some buzzwords about cross-team alignment, maybe a heat map or two with red arrows mysteriously pointing away from her own fumbles. She even named the meeting something slick, New Horizons, Scaling Smart, God help us. I didn't prep anything. No slides, no note cards. My plan was simple. Observe, document, nod occasionally. I had no intention of speaking. Let them squirm in the mess they made, until I saw the seating chart. The meeting was in person, unusually enough. Conference Room A, the glass box with the floor-to-ceiling whiteboard that people mostly used for grandstanding. My assigned seat was 2 chairs down from Callie, directly across from legal, and right next to Raymond, the board liaison. That's when the plan shifted. Raymond wasn't the kind of guy who showed up unless someone was skating near a governance violation. He was old school, ex-military calm, the kind of man who could spot a lie before the mouth finished moving. If he was coming, someone had pulled the fire alarm behind the scenes. I printed 3 documents, a summary of foundational system dependencies, a clean copy of Clause 8.2.1b, Foundational Asset Designation, a signature log tracing Lighthouse's ownership flow. I put them in a folder, nothing flashy, just the facts. If the conversation turned south, I'd be ready to hand it over like a witness sliding a manila envelope across a courtroom table. The morning of the meeting, Jordan posted a selfie to Slack with the caption Showtime, followed by a rocket emoji and something that looked like a smoothie in a mason jar. Callie walked in 10 minutes early, wearing a white blazer that practically screamed, "Trust me." She greeted everyone like a motivational speaker, bright smile, hand gestures, verbal glitter. She passed out printed agendas like they were golden tickets. I took mine, read it. Bullet point 3, System Redesign Highlights presented by Jordan T. Bullet point 4, Q&A Transition Successes and Learnings. I nearly rolled my eyes into another dimension. Raymond sat down beside me, gave a short nod. Linda, Raymond, you built Lighthouse, right? He asked, flipping open a notebook with tidy handwriting. I kept my expression still, from the ground up. He nodded once more, scribbled something, that was it. The meeting began with Callie's usual flourish. We're so excited to share our recent progress, she began, and really dig into how this new structure is enabling velocity and clarity. She used the word velocity 4 times in 2 minutes, and Jordan took over, clicking through slides full of icons, flowcharts, and a quote from Steve Jobs that didn't actually apply to anything we were doing. He described the lighthouse revamp like he'd personally built it in his garage while listening to lo-fi beats. No mention of its original architecture. No mention of compliance hiccups. Just elevated pipelines and increased transparency. Until slide 7. That's when someone from the vendor side leaned forward. You walk us through the escalation logic for your onboarding triggers? Jordan blinked, clicked, fumbled. Callie cut in too quickly. We're still finalizing some elements. Transitions always come with learning curves. That's when Raymond turned to me. His pen tapped once on the agenda. Linda, he said, not a question, a request. I didn't even open the folder. I just spoke. The current onboarding triggers were implemented under Phase 2 of Lighthouse. They were built on conditional handoffs between compliance gates and user provisioning systems. The escalation logic includes 3 fallback routes, none of which are documented in the current flow. Silence. Then, so who owns that logic now? The vendor asked. Before Callie could answer, my old team lead, Carla, who'd been quiet the entire time, just said, Linda built it. She's the cornerstone here. The air left the room like someone had cracked a vacuum seal. Callie blinked, smiled a little too wide. Of course, Linda was foundational to the early version, but Jordan's team has really brought it forward. Raymond's pen stopped moving. The vendor raised an eyebrow. Legal started flipping pages in their binder. And me? I just leaned back in my chair, folded my hands in my lap, and waited, because the trap had already sprung, and they didn't even realize it yet. The question came from Jennifer, the external compliance consultant brought in to assess cross-system transparency, which, in plain English, meant find out why everything's falling apart without using the word lawsuit. She'd been quiet most of the meeting, taking notes with a level of detail that made even Raymond glance over once or twice. When she finally spoke, it wasn't dramatic. No throat clearing, no tension raising, just a simple, surgical question. Can someone walk me through the reporting reconciliation logic between Lighthouse and the finance ledger? Specifically the trigger that flags discrepancies in vendor payouts? Callie blinked like someone had just asked her to recite the national anthem backwards. Jordan looked at her, then at the screen, then back at her, like a raccoon caught inside a vending machine and wondering who locked the door. Oh yes, Callie said quickly. That system, right. So that was part of the revamp. We, restructured the reconciliation layer to better reflect. Jennifer cut in, calmly, kindly but not softly. I've reviewed the diagrams Jordan sent over last week. That trigger isn't in there. And the last documented reference to that logic came from a system log 3 months ago under Linda's credentials. The room froze. I didn't speak. I didn't move. My former team lead, Carla, sitting across from legal, slowly set down her pen, looked directly at Jennifer, then at Raymond, and said the words that would burn into everyone's skull for the rest of the fiscal year. That entire flow was Linda's. She's the cornerstone here, no emphasis, no edge, just a flat statement of truth dropped like a stone into a glass of water, and everything rippled. Jordan went pale first. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He looked at the monitor like it would offer him a lifeline. It didn't. Callie tried to recover, fast and loose, stumbling into a tone she thought sounded composed but came out brittle. Well, sure, Linda created a lot of the initial structure, absolutely. But the current systems reflect team-wide collaboration, and honestly, we're moving into a space where collective ownership is more appropriate for who owns the trigger now? Jennifer asked again. Not budging. I mean, that depends on how you define ownership, Callie replied, smiling too tightly. Legally, said legal. Silence. All eyes flicked to me. I opened my folder, slid out the printout. A one-pager, signature logs, access records, the original design memo for the reporting trigger, dated and watermarked with my name and Carla's sign-off. I didn't push it across the table, just held it, let it exist in the space. Raymond leaned forward. Was this documentation part of the transition? He asked Callie, voice flat. Callie licked her lips. There was some overlap. We were iterating fast and I trusted the team to handle version control. Jennifer tapped her pen on her notepad. So you never reassigned ownership, never updated the logic, and never ensured continuity for a compliance-critical flow? I wasn't aware it hadn't been updated, Callie said, voice climbing higher. That's the problem, Carla murmured. Callie looked like she wanted to throw a chair through the window. I sat still. Raymond turned to legal. We'll need to revisit the quarterly review documentation. Legal nodded slowly, especially given Clause 12.4c, material misrepresentation of personnel contribution during operational reporting review. Callie inhaled sharply, and for the first time since she'd walked into this company, her confidence cracked. It wasn't a breakdown, not yet, but there it was. The flicker. The moment her expression shifted from I've got this to oh, no, she tried to reach for control again, launching into a babble about new layers of ownership and team transition blur, but it was too late. Carla had said the thing out loud, the thing everyone knew but hadn't had the nerve or the clearance to say. I was the cornerstone, not a helper, not a legacy contributor, not a footnote. And without me, the whole damn thing didn't work. Callie saw it in their faces, and I saw it in hers. That split-second flicker of panic behind the eyes of someone who just realized they're not in charge of the narrative anymore. And that was the moment everything began to unravel. The next question came from Raymond. He didn't raise his voice, didn't clear his throat. He just spoke in that same clipped tone that made interns sit up straight and executives sweat through their undershirts. Callie, can you provide attribution documentation for the current lighthouse infrastructure? She opened her mouth, closed it, glanced at Jordan, who looked like he wanted to crawl into the HDMI port behind the monitor and disappear. Well, we've been collaborating across teams and distributing ownership more broadly, so attribution's been, fluid. Documentation? Raymond repeated. Still calm. Callie fumbled with her laptop, her fingers suddenly 10 sizes too big for her keyboard. I believe Jordan has something in the shared drive. I'll pull it up. Jordan nodded like a bobblehead with a loose spring. Totally, yeah, I have the deck. It's got everyone listed. He opened the folder. Clicked. Silence. Jennifer leaned forward. Jordan, I think you're showing the status update deck, not the architectural breakdown. He froze. Oh, right, 1 sec. Meanwhile, legal was quietly scrolling on their tablet, flipping through internal quarterly reviews. Midway through the meeting, they paused, tilted the screen, and held it up so the rest of the room could see. Callie, legal said flatly. In your Q2 review submission, you cited Jordan as the lead contributor for the system reporting flow. Callie blinked. That's accurate from a rollout perspective. Legal scrolled. Your notes list him as the designer and architect of the logic, which contradicts both the audit logs and the vendor access trail. Callie's jaw twitched. There must have been a miscommunication. I assumed he had taken over those responsibilities. Did you confirm it? Jennifer asked, voice steady, knife-like. Callie didn't answer. HR cleared their throat. We're going to need to revisit Callie's signed operational acknowledgement, specifically Clause 4.2. Raymond didn't look away from her. Clause 4.2? HR nodded grimly. Material misrepresentation of core personnel functions. If proven, it triggers provisional suspension pending review. Mandatory? Jordan suddenly found something very interesting on the table. And still, I said nothing. I didn't need to. Callie was unraveling faster than a cheap suit on a rainy day. Her voice got thinner, higher. She repeated phrases like collaborative evolution and team-led transition like they were incantations, but none of it landed, because every person in that room had seen the flow, heard Carla's line, watched the systems fall apart the moment I was erased. Now the paper trail confirmed it. Legal turned to me. Linda, do you have documentation showing your contributions to the reporting flow and onboarding logic? I slid the folder across the table, didn't open it, didn't monologue. Just a manila envelope filled with exact dates, approval stamps, code version notes, access logs, and the original SOP signatures. Carla's initials. Mine, not Jordan's, not Callie's. Jennifer skimmed one page and nodded. This is definitive. Callie opened her mouth, probably to lie, probably to spin, but HR raised a hand. We've seen enough for now. Let's pause the discussion here. Raymond nodded. We'll reconvene with a limited group, and just like that it was done. No shouting, no courtroom drama. Just silence, documents, and Callie watching her own reputation fall apart one bullet point at a time. She looked at me like I'd stabbed her, but I hadn't lifted a finger. I'd just let the truth breathe. She packed her laptop like she was disarming a bomb. Jordan followed behind her, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Raymond looked around the room, then down at the folder. Well, he said, not unkindly. That answers that. No one spoke for a long moment. And then Carla, still calm, said, sometimes the cornerstone doesn't need to move. Just let the structure collapse around it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just reached for my coffee and took a slow sip. One part left. The door to the executive conference room closed with a soft finality. No windows, no Slack threads. Just Callie, HR, legal, Raymond, and silence so thick you could spread it on toast. I sat one room over, sipping lukewarm coffee and waiting for the bang. It didn't take long. Less than 15 minutes into her context framing, HR played it. Audio from her second one-on-one with me, recorded and stored per internal compliance policy. Her voice clear as day, you're technically strong, but you're impossible to manage. Timestamped. Filed. Annotated. Raymond asked her to explain the comment in light of the now documented proof that I'd designed, implemented, and silently maintained every mission-critical function she'd tried to bury. She backpedaled so hard you could hear the tires screeching from the hallway. Said it was figurative, said it was misunderstood, said it was a moment of misjudged tone. Legal read clause 4.2 aloud again, slowly, just to make it hurt. I was called in shortly after. Calm, hair tied back, no documents in hand because I didn't need to carry anything. They'd already read the file I submitted. A clean, concise breakdown of task logs, delegation chains, vendor threads, SOP sign-offs, and every deleted file metadata entry since Lighthouse was hijacked. It was surgical, precise, and somehow more brutal than any accusation. Callie stared at me like I'd stabbed her in the chest, but I hadn't. I'd simply let her speak, in her own words. HR cleared their throat. Effective immediately, Callie is being placed on administrative leave pending further internal review. Your cooperation is appreciated. Callie stood. Stone-faced, no blazer this time, no slides, just the realization that all the smoke she blew had cleared and the house she built was empty. She walked out of the room, didn't look back. Raymond turned to me. We'd like to offer you the role. VP of Systems Strategy. Full control, you've already earned it. I looked at him, paused, then smiled. Thank you, I said, but I've already built something else. 3 months earlier. While they were busy erasing my name from systems they didn't understand, I'd registered an LLC. Quietly. I'd booked one small contract with a former vendor who still trusted me, then another. By the time this meeting happened, I had 3 confirmed clients, all departments within this very company. The same departments Callie tried to puppeteer into her portfolio. My first invoice was already processed. I stood up, reached for my folder, and shook Raymond's hand. No hard feelings, I said. Just clarity. He nodded once. Let us know if you're open to an advisory retainer. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just walked. Down the hallway, past the open concept workspace where half the staff was pretending not to watch. Past the kitchen, where Jordan had once lectured a finance associate about flow-based productivity. Past the wall where they hung pictures of employee of the quarter next to empty motivational quotes printed in Helvetica. I didn't stop until I hit the lobby. As the glass doors slid open behind me, my phone buzzed. Inbox, new license request from VP of Ops urgent. I smiled, tucked the phone into my coat pocket, and whispered, just for myself, still impossible to manage if you're incompetent. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.